House will come to order. Please join Representative McCormick in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Shebel, please call the roll.
Representatives Amabile, Bacon, Baisley, Benavidez, Burnett, Bird. Oh, she's here? Okay. Bockenfeld. Yeah. Basenecker. Oh, there he is. Bradfield. Caravale. Carver. Catlin. Cutter. Doherty. Duran. He's here today? Nice. Oh, she's here. Esgar. She's on the wall.
Happy Friday.
Exum. Froelich. She's here. Geithner. Hey. Gonzalez Gutierrez. Gray. Okay. Rep Gray's excused for now. Or is that him right there? Yeah. I see him. Hanks. Hanks is excused. Herod. Holtorf. Hooten. Oh, Representative Hooten. Okay, she's excused. Judah. Kennedy. Kip. Larson. Lindsay. Lontine. Luck. Lynch. McCluskey. McCormick. McKean. Is that 80? Really? Oh, McLaughlin. Michelson Janae. I do not see her. Okay, Michelson Janae is excused. Mullica. Neville. Oh, actually, I think I've got... Yeah, Neville's excused today, too. Ortiz.
Here.
Helton. Pico. Ransom. Rich. Ricks.
Here.
Roberts. Sandridge. Sirota. Snyder. Soper. Sullivan. Tipper.
Here.
Titone. Valdez A. Valdez D.
Good morning, Colorado.
Van Beber. Van Winkle. Weissman is excused today. Will. Oh, he's here. Williams. Woodrow. Woog. Young. Mr. Speaker here. Huh? Okay.
(61) present, 4 excused. We have a quorum. Representative McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Journal of Thursday, February 17th be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk.
Members, you've heard the motion that the journal be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk. All those in favor say aye.
Yes!
All those opposed, no. It's the most focused vote that we've had on both sides, but the ayes have it and the motion is approved. Announcements and introductions. Representative Van Winkle.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appear to be the announcement introduction today, which is very nice. But first, let me start off by commending you for your leadership, Mr. Speaker. You do have the ability to keep your wits about you when those around you are losing theirs. And early in the pandemic, that leadership quality was very important, and I very much appreciate it because we didn't know exactly what we were facing in March of 2020. We had this crazy study out of the United Kingdom. We had this guy named Fauci that we didn't know that kept appearing with our president. And your leadership really is appreciated, and we got very good things out of it, such as remote participation. If I'm at home or if I feel that itch in my throat or my kids are sick or something, I can stay home and still be able to represent my district. Remote testimony, the same thing. If a constituent really cares about a bill and they want to participate in the process, then they can still, and that's a fantastic thing. But I must take issue with one current policy, and that is the House mask mandate. It is a bit silly to me that we here, very few of us wear masks, and very few people out there are wearing masks, but for a member of the public that comes, or a member of our staff who works for us, they are forced to wear a mask under this policy. It just doesn't make sense. If someone testifies on a bill, and this is something that frankly has kind of grossed me out, is they'll take their mask off to testify and set it where the previous 20 people set their mask. And then we force them essentially to put it back on, and it's kind of gross, and it's hard to enforce for our sergeants and for our state patrol. They're the ones tasked with enforcing it. And let me just remind the body that this is the people's house. We work for the people, not the other way around. And if someone wants to wear a mask, that's fantastic. Wear it too. Add some bling to it, make it cool, that's awesome. Do you. But if someone doesn't want to, if they don't feel safe wearing one or harms them in some way, mentally or physically, I ask that the mask mandate be lifted and that we can return this House to a more normal status. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Van Winkle. And that was more of maybe a moment of personal privilege than necessarily an announcement, but it's important I can just note that the majority leader and I have been having conversations with nonpartisan staff and with different members, and I think that there will be an update to the policies coming soon, and we're just working on that. So it's something that you should expect to see possibly as early as the sort of changes as early as next week. But again, I want to make sure that we have the time to work with nonpartisan staff. So appreciate the comments, understand where different people are at in this building, and we will continue to make sure that those conversations with nonpartisan staff take place, and that as soon as we can, we will let the body know of any changes that are in place. Further announcements and introductions. Representative Lantine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and this is truly an announcement about a committee meeting this afternoon. Members, the Capitol Building Advisory Committee is meeting this afternoon at 1:30 in the Old Supreme Court, and we have a lot to talk about, including an update on the Capitol fencing, a JBC committee capital project, the presidential portrait for President Biden, about the Union soldier, an update on a statue we're putting in the park across the street, General Rose, a certificate we need to display that was found that has some historical value, an update from visitor services, and a staff update. Should be riveting. Hope to see you, or those of you who are interested there. Thank you.
Representative Holtorf.
Sir, economic news. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, esteemed colleagues. I come today as continuing my commitment to former Representative Liston on economic news. I want to talk a little bit about our debt to GDP ratio. It's a metric comparing a country's public debt to its gross domestic product. Comparing the country's debts, or what it owes, to what it produces. This ratio reliably indicates a particular country's ability to pay back its debts, often expressed as a percentage. It also is interpreted as the number of years needed to pay back debt if GDP is dedicated entirely to debt repayment. Now, this is not an issue that has a letter behind it. Let's be very clear. Many people are guilty in public spaces and public places of taking advantage of this. I want to make that point. I also want to make the point and announce that the United States has remained under 100% debt to GDP ratio for most of its history, with two exceptions. The first exception is during World War II. During World War II, because of the requirements to defeat Imperial Japanese forces and defeat the Nazi German forces, GDP, this ratio went to 114 in 1945, 114%, and in 1946 rose to 119%. In 1948, it dropped back below 100%. The other time in the history of this country that this ratio has gone above 100%, well, that is in current time. Starting in 2014, and 2015, and 2016. Now, I will tell you that you can give this a plus or minus 3 to 5% statistical error. But during those years, we bounced around 101, 102, 105%. In 2017 and 2018, we continued at that level. Into 2019, 107%. But something very dangerous is happening in this country, and it's happening in this Capitol. And I want to talk about that a little bit. I'll be brief, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, and Representative Holtorf, this really isn't an announcement, and I'm trying to give as much grace as I possibly can.
Wrap it up in
but
1 minute.
yeah, but like maybe we should have a conversation too about like what exactly. Again, this time is for announcements and introductions. I'll let you keep going, but this really is not an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to differ, but I appreciate your leadership. And I'll get to my point very quickly. So in 2020, we went to 129% debt to GDP. In 2021, we're now at 124%, and it continues to rise. Now, there's estimation that say 77% public debt to GDP ratio is a good threshold. Statesmen and stateswomen need to realize that increased threat of debt is a real problem, as we continue to spend taxpayers' money without consideration for this important economic metric. Fiscal policy can lead to increased debt to GDP ratio. Now, where does this apply, Mr. Speaker?
I don't think it applies to Colorado because we have a balanced budget, but I think that we should.
Well,
again, Representative Holtorf, I'm not trying to we shouldn't have this discussion on the mic, but this really isn't an announcement and introduction, and it certainly doesn't apply to Colorado since our Constitution says we have to balance our budget. So I'm really trying to give as much grace as I possibly can. You said you were wrapping up, and we're still going.
I'm going to wrap up in 30 seconds, Mr. Speaker. As we get ARPA money from the federal government and we distribute that throughout the state, I will tell you it directly affects this ratio. That money is not manna from heaven. It has to come from somewhere, Mr. Speaker. And right now, 80% of all U.S. dollars in existence in the history of this country have been printed in the last 22 months. Mr. Speaker, I think this is significant economic news. I appreciate your leadership greatly, and I hope that my colleagues are heeding this warning. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Any other announcements, introductions? Seeing none. Oh, here we go. Representative Herod.
Well, I'm like, it's not my thing.
Representative Herod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we do have a tribute. It is still Black History Month, and so we are coming at you with some more Black history. Mr. Sheba, will you please read the tribute?
Mr. Schiebel.
State of Colorado. The House of Representatives convened in the 73rd General Assembly hereby extends sincere commendations to Colorado's civil rights leaders, old and new. As early as the founding of the state, black Coloradans have been fighting for civil rights. In the 1860s, Henry O. Wagner, a nationally renowned abolitionist and civil rights activist, fought for black education. At his urging, the Denver School Board approved a segregated school in 1867 and integrated schools in 1873. Later, he, along with his brother-in-law, Barney Ford, ensured Colorado could not achieve statehood unless black men could vote. In 1895, Joseph H. Stewart, Colorado's second black representative, drafted Colorado's Civil Rights Act. The act passed with no opposition and ensured that all persons, regardless of skin color within Colorado, should have quiet enjoyment of any public place or business. During the early 1900s, the Ku Klux Klan came into prominence in Colorado. Jim Crow policies were successful in delegitimizing the 1895 Act. Throughout Colorado, housing and school segregation became the main battleground for civil rights activists from the 1940s to 60s. Redlining was the practice of labeling minority neighborhoods as undesirable and unworthy of financial support. The Colorado chapter of the Congress of Racial Equality, or CORE, founded by Jim Farmer, staged one of the West's first segregation protests by picketing a Denver segregated movie theater in 1943. CORE sent Colorado's first black freedom rider, Charles Biggers, a Navy veteran, to the South. And through the activism of CORE's local civil rights icons like Dorothy Briscoe, Anna Jo Haynes, and Wilma and Wellington Webb, fought along with Rachel B. Noel through school bus and house bombings to famously desegregate redlined schools and neighborhoods. Now, 58 years after the National Civil Rights Act passed, the legacy of racist housing and education policies continue to impact Coloradans throughout generational wealth gaps, opportunity gaps, and disparate health outcomes based on race. The movement of 2022 looks different than that of the past, but has seen new faces and heard more collective voices demanding equality. Black Coloradans' fight for civil rights is a fight for all rights. The Colorado House of Representatives would like to pay tribute to Colorado's past, present, and future civil rights leaders during Black History Month of 2022. On request of Representative Jennifer Bacon, given this 18th day of February 2022, State Capitol, Denver, signed Alec Garnett, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Representative Parrott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Schiebel. Members, you can be seated. As you just heard, Colorado has a legacy of civil rights leaders. One thing that I remember very well was marching through the streets of Northeast Denver with then Congressman John Lewis, who also told stories of Dr. King marching through Denver to ensure that we had equality right here in Colorado. Colorado's most pervasive Jim Crow tool was redlining, as you heard in the tribute. More passive than the open laws of the South, redlining was a form of de facto segregation, was the practice of labeling minority neighborhoods as undesirable, unworthy of financial lending or support. It was also designed to show realtors where black people could and could not live. One of those areas is right in my district of House District 8. Colorado Boulevard, I know many of you all have driven on Colorado Boulevard, was a redlining line where folks could not live east of Colorado Boulevard. Park Hill, the neighborhood that I live in, was actually not a neighborhood that allowed black people to live in. And as mentioned, my predecessors and mentors, Wellington Webb, Wilma Webb, and Anna Jo Haynes, you might know Anna Jo as the early childhood champion of this capital, actually led a movement to end redlining in Colorado. Anna Jo actually joined forces with a white woman in Park Hill to end redlining. And she has such a legacy. When you see her, thank her for her commitment to early childhood, but also for her commitment to ending segregation in Denver, Colorado. In Pueblo, an appraiser justified redlining neighborhoods because they were home to working people of lower class, liberal scattering of Negroes, quote unquote, foreign elements of the poorest classes, foreigners, chiefly Mexicans, and inferior class of white people, according to a 1934 map, literally on the map. The Colorado Trust, who studied redlining in the city, reports that 4 areas were intentionally redlined in Colorado Springs. Mill Street, Hillside, West Side, and Cohios. Potentially working-class neighborhoods populated with people of color. Evidence of redlining was also found in the drawing of school districts. In fact, the Supreme Court case, the Keyes case, based out of Denver, also forced school integration and an end to de facto forced school integration and an end to school segregation. That Keyes case was right here in Colorado and was a landmark case that affected the entire country. So, Colorado's legacy is rich and deep, and I look forward to hearing from my colleagues in the Black Caucus about some other historical moments in civil rights right here in Colorado.
Representative Bacon.
Thank you. Given what we just heard in regards to the structure of our neighborhoods, African Americans then began to pool their resources and won electoral seats to influence change in government. From school boards to city councils, from mayorships to the state legislature, African American presence has changed outcomes for many that have been disenfranchised. The first Black elected official was Representative John T. Gunnell in the 1880s from Arapahoe County. And the first Black elected official post-Reconstruction era was Rachel B. Knoll. The first Black mayor was Ada B. Evans of Fairplay. And so Colorado has certainly had opportunities and a legacy to fight for civil rights through elected leadership.
Representative Judah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have the honor of talking about Claretta Lanier, who is now a Denverite. Coretta Walls Lanier, at the age of 14, was the youngest of 9 courageous Black students known as the Little Rock Nine, who integrated Little Rock Central High School in 1957. Lanier and her fellow students initially were escorted to Central High School by the 101st Airborne Division of the United States Army, and later the Arkansas National Guard. Daily, they endured verbal, taunts, and physical harassment while at school. Lanier was one of the 3 Little Rock Nine students to return to Central High School after the closing of all Little Rock high schools in 1958 to 1959, and became the first Black woman to walk across the Central High School stage to receive her diploma. And she now resides in Denver, Colorado.
Representative Exum.
Okay. Now I was seeing if you have the photo up. Okay, there we go. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What you see on the screen is Mr. Charles Banks, and I got this information from Colorado Springs Pioneer Museum curator of history, Leah Davis Withrow. On June 19, 1865, Union soldiers led by Major General Gordon Granger landed in Galveston, Texas with the news of the Civil War was over and the enslaved were free now. Despite President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation effective January 1, 1863, minimal Union soldiers in Texas met Lincoln's executive order was not obeyed. 2.5 years later, initial shock turned to jubilation in approximately 250,000 enslaved people in Texas seeking to reunify with family members who had been cruelly separated. Former enslaved people were on the move. On the next several decades, approximately 6 million African Americans moved out of the South to the North and the West and became known as the Great Migration. For many families, the journey was often not but one several successive migrations over a number of years. John and Jenny Rhodes lived in Arkansas, Texas, Oklahoma, and finally Georgia before settling in Colorado Springs in 1915. Both John and Jenny's parents were enslaved. John taught himself to read and write and eventually gained employment at the first Black brakeman on the Rock Island Railroad. Jenny took laundry, cared for her 4 children, and graciously opened the home of 745 North Pine Street every summer to many visitors, members, friends, and recent African American migrants to Colorado Springs. Seeking political asylum, social, economic equality, African Americans organized the Colorado Springs branch of the NAACP at Payne Chapel. In August 1918, Reverend Wayne Ward, pastor of the church, became the first president. through the 1930s, NAACP members Kimball, Schroed, Goffin, and Charles Banks, who you see on the screens, were two of the most outspoken local activists working to eliminate segregation. The pair worked to organize Black and Hispanics in a coordinated political unit in order to combat discrimination and increase political and economic opportunity. Charles Banks was born February 27, 1880 in Buffalo, West Virginia, a veteran of the Spanish-American War. Charles Banks served proudly with the Black Company B of the 24th Indiana Volunteers. After his honorable discharge from the U.S. Army, Banks moved to Colorado Springs in 1905. He was the president of the Colorado Springs NAACP for 5 years. In the 1940s, Charles Banks worked tirelessly to promote the equality and oppose racial segregation and discrimination. He worked as a page at the Colorado State House in the 1930s and used his personal contact with State Senator Edwin Johnson to urge enactment of 1935 Colorado Civil Rights Amendment. As a veteran himself, Charles Banks grew increasingly appalled by the mistreatment of African American soldiers who had served in World War II. In 1945, he organized a campaign of peaceful, nonviolent sit-ins at local businesses in violation of the 1935 Colorado Civil Rights Law. In Colorado Springs, African Americans were denied accommodations at local hotels and restaurants, among other places. At George's Hamburgers on South Tejon Street, directly across from the courthouse, and now the Colorado Springs Pioneer Museum, blacks could only order food to go. Several residents remember being denied service at the Walgreens lunch counter and having their food so heavily salted it was not able to eat. Lawsuits backed by the local NAACP under the leadership of Charles Banks were filed in October and November 1947 to challenge the illegal racial discrimination. These measures proved successful, with several businesses forced to pay fines and court costs for their illegal discrimination. From 1905 until his death on September 11, 1976, Charles Banks gained a reputation as a civil rights leader and fearless advocate for equality. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Exum and members of the Black Caucus. Seeing no further announcements and/or introductions, the next order of business is third reading of bill's final passage. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title to Senate Bill 13.
Senate Bill 13 by Senators Fenberg and Holbert, also Representatives Garnett and McKean, concerning requirements for boards and commissions and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Assistant Majority Leader Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move Senate Bill 13 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 13 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine and members please proceed to vote. For those participating remotely, Majority Leader Escar, how do you vote?
Yes.
Majority Leader Escar votes yes. Representative Ricks, how do you vote? Representative Tipper, how do you vote?
Yes. Yes.
Representative Tipper votes yes. Representative Ricks, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ricks votes yes. Representative Basenecker, how do you vote? One more time, Representative Basenecker. We can't hear you. I'll come right back to you. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Basenecker.
Yes.
Representative Basenecker votes yes. Please close the machine. With 61 aye votes, 0 no votes, and 4 excused, Senate Bill 13 is passed. Co-sponsors. Co-sponsors. Just joking. Please close the machine. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title of House Bill 1046.
House Bill 1046 by Representatives McLaughlin and Catlin, also Senator Winter, concerning authority for local governments to designate highways under their jurisdiction for over snow use only.
Assistant Majority Leader Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1046 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1046 on third reading and final passage. See no further discussion. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Majority Leader Escar, how do you vote?
Yes.
Majority Leader Escar votes yes. Representative Tipper, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Tipper votes yes. Representative Ricks, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ricks votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Basenecker, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Basenecker votes yes. Please close the machine. With 58 aye votes, 3 no votes, and 4 excused, House Bill 1046 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of Senate Bill 17.
Senate Bill 17 by Senators Scott and Zenzinger, also Representatives Basenecker and Catlin, concerning the determination that a load of fluid milk products hauled by a vehicle is not a divisible load under the vehicle weight limits permitted by law.
Assistant Majority Leader Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move Senate Bill 17 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 17 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Shebel, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Majority Leader Escar, how do you vote?
Yes.
Majority Leader Escar votes yes. Representative Tipper, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Tipper votes yes. Representative Ricks, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ricks votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Basenecker, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Basenecker votes yes. Please close the machine. With 61 aye votes, 0 no votes, and 4 excused, Senate Bill 17 is passed. Co-sponsors. Representative D. Valdez, co-sponsor. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of House Bill 1090.
House Bill 1090 by Representatives Ransom and Young, also Senators Buckner and Smallwood, concerning allowing a child reasonable independence to engage in activities without finding that the child is abused or neglected.
Assistant Majority Leader Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1090 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is the passage of House Bill 1090 on third reading and final passage. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to give you an update of what to expect today. We have a pack of 5 children from 4 different families, 2 dogs, and a whole wagon of Girl Scout cookies that are available for anyone who may want to purchase them today, but they are also wandering the halls right now without any adult supervision, and I would plead to not have me considered to be a child abuser for allowing that to occur. Thank you.
Minority Leader McKean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You looked a little scared. I don't usually come down here on third readings. You meant the Girl Scout cookies, correct?
Representative Ransom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And once again, I want to give a shout out to my colleague that is letting his children have some freedom in his place of work because he knows that they are capable of being here in our people's house selling their Girl Scout cookies. Thank you so much for letting your kids have some freedom, Representative, and I'm really glad that we can all enjoy seeing children learn about government here. Thank you very much.
Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to commend my colleague for promoting free market capitalism to the highest level. And I love Girl Scout cookies, and I'm going to get in there, and when I find that wagon, I need to take some home this weekend. I encourage everybody else to consider that as well.
Thank you. I heard they're free, but all right. Any further discussion? Seeing none. The question before us is the passage of House Bill 1090 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Majority Leader Eskar, how do you vote?
Yes.
Majority Leader Eskar votes yes. Representative Tipper, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Tipper votes yes. Representative Ricks, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ricks votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Basenecker, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Basenecker votes yes. With 61 aye votes, 0 no votes, and 4 excused, House Bill 1090 is adopted. Please close the machine. With 61 aye votes, 0 no votes, and 4 excused, House Bill 1090 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of the House Bill 1034.
House Bill 1034 by Representatives Byrd and Sandridge, also Senators Garcia and Priola, concerning the administration of retirement plans administered by the Fire and Police Pension Association and connection therewith, merging the statewide defined benefit plan, the statewide hybrid plan, and the Social Security supplemental plan into a single new statewide retirement plan.
Nice job. Assistant Majority Leader Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1034 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is the passage of House Bill 1034 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Shebel, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Majority Leader Eskar, how do you vote?
Yes.
Majority Leader Eskar votes yes. Representative Tipper, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Tipper votes yes. Representative Ricks, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ricks votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Basenecker, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Basenecker votes yes. Please close the machine. With 60 aye votes, 1 no vote, and 4 excused, House Bill 1034 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Majority Leader Eskar, co-sponsor. Representative D. Valdez, Representative Basenecker, co-sponsor. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of the House Bill 1089.
House Bill 1089 by Representative Woodrow, also Senator Winter, concerning a requirement that transportation network companies provide insurance to protect individuals from damages caused by uninsured motorists.
Assistant Majority Leader Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1089 on third reading and final passage.
Representative Bachmanfeld.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to serve with you.
Honor to serve with you too, Representative Bachmanfeld.
Members, House Bill 1089 hurts small business. It's an assault on consumer affordability. It's half-baked and not ready for prime time. Please vote no on House Bill 1089.
Is there further discussion? Representative Woodrow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is an honor to serve with you.
Honor to serve with you too, Representative Woodrow.
Colleagues, I'll remind you that Uber and Lyft are not small businesses. If we're talking about the drivers actually support this bill. The drivers are part of the driving force that asked me to bring this bill. So when someone comes down to the well and suggests that we are hurting small businesses with this bill, I'd suggest to you that they have not spoken to the actual drivers. Uber and Lyft are multi-billion, multinational corporations, and they can afford to put in this type of insurance. They carried this insurance back in March 2020, and when they took away this insurance, they did not lower their prices for consumers. In fact, they raised their prices after getting rid of this insurance. It's because we have market concentration, and we can have that debate at another time. I will say vote yes. Thank you.
Representative Soper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's an honor to serve with you.
It's an honor to serve with you too, Representative Soper.
I rise in opposition of this bill, but I really don't want to, members, because I actually see that a real issue was exposed here. However, I won't be voting for it for the following reasons. You could have a taxi and an Uber that are both driven by Mario Andretti, one of the greatest drivers in the world. Arguably, the passenger in the vehicle being driven by Mario Andretti doesn't own a car. They don't have uninsured motorist insurance. Through no fault of the driver, they're hit by another vehicle. It's a hit and run. If this bill is passed, what ends up happening under this fact pattern is the person who's in the Uber, their medical expenses would be covered. However, the person who's in the taxi, their medical expenses would not be covered. What this bill does is it takes and it separates two victims in identical fact patterns and it treats them differently. I believe as lawmakers it's our responsibility to ensure equal justice under the law and that we treat victims who are situated exactly the same when it comes to addressing medical liability. Until that gets correct, I will be in opposition.
Thank you, Representative Soper. Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to serve with you.
Honor to serve with you too, Representative Larson.
And members, I apologize for coming down on third reading. I remoted in for the first time yesterday, so I was unable to speak on second. But I too rise in strong opposition to this bill. And the impact on small business is one thing. My primary concern with this is the impact on families and individuals. There are a number of people who utilize Uber and Lyft, and we were talking about a 6% increase. We are talking about seniors who live in densely populated areas who've done the calculus that it is more cost effective to take an Uber or Lyft to where they want to go rather than maintain their own automobile and automobile insurance. We are talking about families who will put their teenage children in Ubers or a corollary hop, skip, drive type service to get their kids to school because we have a bus driver shortage. We are talking about working class people who use these services to get to work, again, because it is more cost effective than having a car. And to hear 6% tossed about as, oh, it's just 6%, it's just 6%, that's an insane increase. We're talking about a rate of inflation in this country at 7% last year, and we're talking about how this is more than we have ever experienced in my entire lifetime in a single year. And you're throwing about 6% as though it's nothing? I mean, if you want to talk about an anti-consumer, an anti-family, an anti-citizen of Colorado bill, here it is. And if we want our words from the beginning of this session to have any sort of truth that rings through to the people of Colorado when we talked about affordability, tell me how adding 6% to the cost of getting your kids to school, of getting yourself to your work or to your grocery store, how is that making Colorado more affordable? Please vote no.
Further discussion. Speaker Pro Tem Benavides.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I too was remote yesterday and was not able to speak on this bill, but I was in judiciary. And this bill, the bottom line about this bill and the most important piece is right now, people that do take Ubers and Lyfts, and there's an accident with someone who is uninsured, they're generally not covered. or only to a minimum amount. What this does is increase the insurance coverage up to $1 million. And it is so important. And this bill is focused on that group. It is not focused on taxi drivers. I think the testimony yesterday is that taxi drivers, the General Assembly, have said taxi drivers will be regulated by the PUC. And all of those that think we're equating the two things, then I think somebody should bring a bill, and I think the sponsor said he would work with everyone to bring a bill to require the PUC to have those same kinds of terms. So it's not comparing one against the other and treating them differently. We do have the power to treat them the same, but we don't have the power in this bill because we've released our authority over taxi drivers. We need to change that to get that back. But we have authority and ability to regulate this industry, and this bill is doing that. It's a very small measure. We heard testimony from individual drivers that were in these accidents, and there was no coverage. I mean, the minimum, we don't have to have uninsured motorist coverage, any of us, and many of us don't. That's the risk we take by not having it. But should a driver that's working for some company, even as an independent contractor, should a passenger that assumes they're going to be covered, should they take that risk? I don't think so. I mean, if we think that's okay not to have uninsured motorist coverage, which we do, fine. But if we think we should have more or we should have a higher limit on it, then let's impose that. But this bill deals with the realities that people face right now. If they get into an Uber or a Lyft and the driver that is at fault that hits them, not the Uber or Lyft, but another driver, they are not going to be covered if that person didn't have insurance. That's what this bill's about. And as far as the cost, I don't take Ubers and Lyfts that often, but I have taken them before, and I think the sponsor said probably all of us have taken one at least once or twice. And it never occurred to me that this bill, when it came forward, that if something happened, that I wouldn't have coverage if I got hurt in an accident. It was a complete surprise to me. And this will stop people being surprised, because when they get surprised, they're in the hospital. They're facing catastrophic bills that they can't pay. This is protection. And 6 cents on the dollar in inflation, okay, that's a lot, and it's a bad time. But the whole reason we all have insurance that we may never use. I've not had an accident in 35, 40 years, but that doesn't mean I don't have car insurance, because I know I need it in case of that time that I'm going to have an accident, and I might have it with somebody that doesn't have insurance. It might be my fault. We do that. And to me, and honestly, you all know this, our insurance goes up for lots of different reasons, not just for this. So this is not an astronomical amount, and I think it would make people that ride Ubers and Lyfts feel much safer. And honestly, Ubers and Lyfts make a good deal of money. They could cover it without raising the costs. That's an assumption that falls on the individuals. And I'm not saying businesses shouldn't be able to increase their fees to cover costs, but this is a reasonable cost. 6 cents to know if I get into a Uber that my fee is going to be 6 cents more. Instead of $10, it's going to be $10.06. I'm willing to, or 60 cents, 60 cents. I'm willing to pay 60 cents if it needs to, if I have the assurance that I'm going to get some coverage if some uninsured motorist is in an accident and it's their fault. I think this is a good bill, and we shouldn't conflate the taxi cab drivers' issues and other issues with this. This is about getting coverage for people hurt in accidents where there currently is no coverage. I think it's a good bill, and I encourage a yes vote.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. Members, just a reminder, we are on third reading, so there should be no discussion. Everyone should be in their chairs and listening to people debating in the well. Minority Leader McKean.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to serve here with you.
Honor to serve with you too, Minority Leader.
Folks, we're going to disagree, and I'm not here to change a lot of hearts and change a lot of minds. We know that third reading is not the time you do that. I will agree with my colleague who says that this is not ready for prime time, because I will tell you that the amount of discussion that I know of to try to find some way to make this work has been ongoing, unending, and is always a process by which we're trying to find the best thing that can be done and the best way to do it. What I'll tell you is what I said yesterday. 60 cents, $1.20, $6.73 if you want to go from DIA to the tech center. That's milk, that's bread. That's the things that the families of this state struggle to provide because of the hard times we live in. So when we get up and we say 6% is a lot, 6% is a lot. But let's look at the underlying premise here. We just heard that because you might get hit by somebody without insurance, because of uninsured motorists, because of uninsured this. Folks, this is yet another way that we're passing on the cost of people who do not comply with Colorado law and drive around without insurance to the people who are paying the bills. So all of a sudden we're going to say, okay, well, we're just going to assume this cost. We're just going to pass it on to the people who are already paying their bills. We're going to pass this cost on to the people who are actually doing all the things that we require them as a state to do. That offends me. It ought to offend all of us. Because the offense is that what we're really trying to do here is to say, we're just going to assume that this happenstance occurs, and we're just going to make somebody else pay for it. I don't think that's ever been our jobs. So I urge a no vote on this for sort of the entire panoply of reasons. Number one, this is not ready. This ought to actually be referred back to second so that there's time. There's time to actually consider all of the different things that are on the table, because that's actually our job, is to make sure that what we come here and do is not to force a solution that works in one direction and not another, but rather to have a meeting of the minds that says this is the best place we can go for the people of the state of Colorado. But that's not where we are. We're on third reading today. So I urge you to reach up and press that no button to say there's a better way to do this. There's a better way to figure out how that group of people who are injured in an accident can be protected. Or maybe better yet, how we can make sure that that conflict between who pays for what never happens in the first place. This is an easy no.
Further discussion. Representative Bockenfeld, you have 9 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yep. You have 9 minutes and 36 seconds.
I'm sorry, how much?
9 minutes.
Promise not to take 9 minutes and 36 seconds. Folks, I wasn't being flippant when I came up here and said that this bill is half-baked and not ready for prime time. I gave everybody a heads up yesterday that there was a fair amount of confusion amongst the legal minds and judiciary. You had an opportunity to go back and listen to that tape. I hope you did. If you have that many legal minds confused about the wording in this bill and if it's really doing what it's doing, that should be a heck of an indication for you to vote no. It needs more work. And nothing was done with this bill yesterday to make it any better. We're kicking the can down the road. We're going to pass it here on thirds, and we're going to send it to the Senate so they can clean it up. That's not the way we should be doing business in this chamber. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I ask for a no vote.
Representative Cutter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will be really brief, but my mom goes to chemo, every 3 weeks, and I can't take her because I'm here. And sometimes she needs an Uber ride, and it is about $30 for her to take one way. And I absolutely guarantee you, she's a senior citizen on a limited fixed income, and I guarantee you that she would rather spend $1.80 and make sure she doesn't have any other coverage. She doesn't drive. Make sure that she is protected from a catastrophic occurrence. $1.80 versus something far more serious and costly. So I have a real world example. I was horrified to find out that she didn't, that she wouldn't be covered in those Uber rides.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. The question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1089 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members, please proceed to vote. Majority Leader Eskar.
Yes.
Majority Leader Eskar votes yes. Representative Tipper.
Yes.
Representative Tipper votes yes. Representative Ortiz.
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Representative D. Valdez.
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Basenecker.
Yes.
Representative Basenecker votes yes. Representative Ricks is excused. Please close machine. With 36 aye votes, 24 no votes, and 5 excused, House Bill 1089 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Representative Basenecker, co-sponsor. Please close the machine. That brings us to Assistant Majority Leader Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I move the following bills be made special orders today at 10:01 a.m. And there will be copies up here as well for you. So, House Bill 1150, House Bill 1169, Senate Bill 22, Senate Bill 62, House Bill 1028, House Bill 1044, House Bill 1076, House Bill 1072, House Bill 1037, House Bill 1043, and House Bill 1060.
The following bills announced by the Assistant Majority Leader will be made special orders today, Friday, February 18th at 10:03 a.m.
I was getting one for you, man.
Representative Woodrow.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House now resolve itself as a committee of the whole for consideration of special orders.
Members, you have heard the motion. Seeing no objection, Representative Woodrow will take the chair.
I was looking at
The committee will come to order.
With your unanimous consent, the bills will be read by title unless there's a request for reading a bill at length. Committee reports are printed and in your bill folders. Floor amendments will be shown on the screen and on your iPads. Bills will be laid over upon the motion of the Assistant Majority Leader, and the court rule is relaxed.
Just like we did in the committee.
Mr. Shebel, please read the first bill on the calendar.
House Bill 1150 by Representatives Bockenfeld and Exum, also Senators Cook and Fields, concerning the elimination of signature requirements for persons who are alleged to have violated certain offenses.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Got it. He has to recognize you first.
Representative Bockenfeld.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move the Judiciary Committee report.
No report.
To the bill.
There's no judiciary, just move the bill.
I'd like to go ahead and move the bill.
Representative Bockenfeld.
I'd like to go ahead and move the bill, sir.
Go ahead, you're good.
Okay, thank you.
So moved.
Members, this is a government efficiency bill. It was a bill that was referred by the Colorado State Patrol. What this bill does is, under current law, a defendant is required to execute the defendant's signature on a citation for a misdemeanor petty offense, misdemeanor traffic offense, or traffic infraction to signify that there's an agreement to pay the penalties or to appear in court. The bill eliminates the defendant's signature requirement. There are several other states who have implemented this process, and the reason this change is being made is because it's establishing a foundation so that potentially e-citation, electronic citation platform may be feasible in the future. I will allow my colleague to explain the why of this bill.
Representative Exum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank Representative Bockenfield for joining me on this bill for the State Patrol. The State Patrol is moving to electronic citations for traffic offense and citations, the e-citation system. It is hoped will greatly reduce the exposure to live traffic for both the defendant and the officer, and will streamline the traffic contact process and facilitate the citation and summon procedures among State Patrol, Department of Revenue, and the judicial branch. This also protects due process and is going to increase the safety of officers and our public. And we ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Bockenfeld.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I do want to point out that the Department of Law and the Attorney General's office has supported this bill, and I also ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1150? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1150. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 1150 passes. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of House Bill 1169.
House Bill 1169 by Representatives Michelson, Janae, and Soper, concerning amending the elements of sexual assault to prohibit sexual misconduct without consent.
Representative Soper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
Oh, it is an honor to serve with you, Representative Soper.
I move House Bill 1169, and there is no committee report.
So moved. Representative Soper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This, members, as you can see, my co-prime is not with us, so please just keep her in your thoughts and prayers today. But this bill is one that's part of a series of bills that Representative Michelson, Janae, and myself have run over the last 3 years to really try to move Colorado's sexual assault and rape law into the 21st century and to make sure that it's clear. What we're doing with this bill is we're changing the definition of unlawful sexual contact for sexual assault to add the words consent to make it very, very clear. I just want to read our current definition and see if in your minds it would be clear to you. Under CRS 18-3-4021A, it would read, "The actor causes submission of the victim by means of sufficient consequence reasonably calculated to cause submission against the victim's will." If you were on a jury and the question before you was whether the victim was raped and whether consent was there, given this definition, what in the world would you decide on the jury? I mean, reasonably calculated, that's certainly antiquated language that comes from a bygone era. And it does. This definition actually was written 50 years ago and was rooted in case law from over 100 years ago. I actually tried to look up the case law, but unfortunately couldn't, but we have another bill to address that. We're changing the definition to, "The actor causes sexual intrusion or sexual penetration knowing the victim does not consent." Knowing the victim does not consent. In other places in our criminal law, we've defined what consent means, so no need to do it here, but this is a very clear, concise definition. It brings us in line to what 35 other states have done, and I would ask for a yes vote. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1169. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 1169 passes. Mr. Sheba, please read the title of Senate Bill 22.
Senate Bill 22 by Senators Lee and Gardner, also Representative Snyder and Soper, concerning the enactment of the Colorado Revised Statutes 2021 as the positive and statutory law of the state of Colorado.
Representative Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just let me say what a real honor it is to work with you.
It is an honor to work with you, Representative Snyder.
Well, thank you. So folks, this is an annual bill, and it's also, to my knowledge, our first palindrome bill of the year.
Palindrome?
Palindrome. Well, it's 22-0-22. Frontwards or backwards. So folks, this, like I said, annual bill, it's called the publication bill. It basically enacts all of the legislation that was passed back in from November 2020 to November 2021, and it makes it the positive and statutory law of the state of Colorado.
Representative Soper.
Merci. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So members, hopefully you all received the reviser's handbook right here. As you can see, there's a lot of slight changes that were made in the statute. And I began asking the question, what were these additional editorial changes that were made? Come to find out, we ran a lot of healthcare bills last year, and no one knows how to spell the word healthcare. Who knew that it was two words? So making it two words was one of the editorial changes that they made. Other things that were changed were grammar, capitalization, verb tense, things that were actually missed that are non-substantive changes. But one thing I wanted to address that I've been asked is what happens if we don't pass the publication bill? Do we just go ahead and get rid of all of the statutes? And I asked permission of the Assistant Majority Leader, and she gave me permission to have a couple of props in the well, so hopefully you recognize these. So here's the effect of what would happen if we don't pass the publication bill. The last set of statutes that were the positive and statutory law of the land for the state of Colorado would be from 2020, which means these books, the red statute books, would be what you'd have to look to from 2020. But then the session laws, because it's still law what we did in 21, you would have to look into these tan books to determine what these session laws were. So an attorney or just the lay citizen would actually have to look at both of these books if we don't pass this bill to determine what the law is. That would be very confusing to the people of Colorado. It would certainly add a lot of confusion to the court system as well, which is why we pass this bill every year to ensure that the red books are the positive and statutory law of the land, and that you only have to refer to one book to know what the law is. With that, I move Senate Bill 22 and ask for a favorable vote.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Pico.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To me, it sounds like a very good bill, and I'm looking forward to perhaps seeing this scheduled on Tuesday so that we could pass Senate Bill 22-022 on to 2022.
Thank you for the palindrome, Representative Pico. Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 22? Seeing none, members, the question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 22. All those in favor of passage say aye.
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 All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 22 is passed. Mr. Shivo, please read the title of Senate Bill 62.
Senate Bill 62 by Senators Lee and Gardner, also Representative Soper and Weissman, concerning procedures of the Committee on Legal Services.
Representative Soper, we're going to start charging you rent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just hoping you'd name the day after me like you did Representative Roberts.
Don't push it.
That sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 62, and there's no committee report.
So moved. To the bill. Representative Soper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I serve on the Committee on Legal Services, and like any of the joint committees, we are able to enact our own rules to govern those committees. However, the reason why we had to put this particular rule into the form of a statute was sometimes we poll the members when it comes to retaining counsel if any of us are sued, and the General Assembly comes to our rescue to be able to defend that lawsuit. And in order to be able to comply with the Colorado Sunshine Laws, we needed to be able to have a little bit of a workable, it's not really an exception, but it's a new means to be able to allow this and still be able to comply with the Sunshine Law. So that's why we're running a bill here. Is it will allow the committee to go ahead and post notice of the issue of retaining counsel, who counsel would be retained for, and that a poll of the committee would be done via telephone. If any one member of the committee objects in the process of the poll immediately stops, and the committee would have to come in person to hold a meeting to actually hear the merits of the question of retaining counsel. But a lot of times, these are incredibly time-sensitive matters. We actually have a list of counsel that we typically retain. And yeah, it's a good bill, and I'd ask for a yes vote.
Thank you, Representative Soper. Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 62? Seeing none, members, the question before us is the passage of Senate Bill 62. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 62 passes. Mr. Shivo, please read the title of House Bill 1028.
House Bill 1028 by Representatives Gray and Hooton, also Senators Winter and Priola, concerning statewide regulations of persons approaching controlled intersections who are not operating motor vehicles.
Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1028 and the Transportation and Local Government Committee report.
To the committee report.
Thank you, members. In committee, we reduced the speed at which one can approach an intersection on a cycle or other small vehicle from 15 miles an hour to 10 miles an hour, and we also add in an educational component for folks to understand the new statewide structure for how to use controlled intersections, and I'd ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on the Transportation and Local Government Committee report? Seeing none, members, the question before us is the adoption of the Transportation and Local Government Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Transportation and Local Government report is adopted. To the bill. Representative Hooton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, what this bill does is make uniform across Colorado a procedure at the intersection for cyclists and small vehicles similar to cyclists that would allow them at a stop sign, not a stoplight, at a stop sign, to slow down and assess what's happening in the intersection, and if they consider it to be safe,
to proceed through the intersection. If any of you have been on a bike, you know how challenging it can be at times to come to a full stop and then get back on your bike and then proceed often against the light to get to the other side. What we'd like to do here in this bill is make it uniform across Colorado. We know with all traffic laws that uniformity is critical to safety and compliance. And with that, I turn the rest of the explanation of the bill over to my colleague.
Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We heard testimony in committee about the extent to which the most dangerous place for a cyclist to be is sitting in an intersection, not moving. It's where they're most vulnerable. Even testimony from the commander in Colorado Springs noted that of 30-something accidents that occurred with a cyclist in an intersection, there were a couple where a person had proceeded incorrectly, but about 30 of them just happened where a person was sitting and waiting and was hit by a vehicle. That can happen by somebody coming up behind you, somebody making a turn and not seeing you when they're making the turn. But the safest thing to do, which we heard in testimony over and over again, the safest thing to do is if you're in a time and a place where a cyclist can clear the intersection, for them to clear the intersection and not sit there and await injury. So we would ask for your vote. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
It is an honor to serve with you, Rep. Larson.
So, members, I rise in strong support of this bill, actually. I have been involved in some conversations about this last year with State Patrol. It's a novel idea. You know, local control is something that gets bandied about in this building quite a bit, and it has its uses and it has its areas where I don't think it should be an overriding principle. Our statewide traffic law, I think consistency should be something that's important. So I think it makes sense to have a uniform set of laws that govern our roads, whether you happen to be in Boulder County or in Boulder City proper, or if you happen to be crossing a county line. The other thing that I love about this, and I've spoken with a lot of law enforcement, is that this has a proven reduction in traffic incidents. So this is just good policy. The data is behind it. It reduces accidents at intersections, and frankly, it's codifying what happens at most intersections, whether this is the law right now or not. So I like this for consistency. I like this for public safety, and I urge a strong yes vote.
Rep. Rich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was in committee the day that we heard this, and since our colleague brought up the Colorado State Patrol, I will say that he did testify, but he testified in opposition to this bill and said that it was bad policy for Colorado Springs. We also heard from some of the municipalities that haven't been able to get this passed, and they, of course, are from the Front Range except for Aspen, and they do have one, but Aspen's a little bit different than the rural area that I live in. And I don't really object to this bill on in metropolitan areas, because I understand, even as a bicyclist like myself, I wouldn't know one municipality to another if I were crossing the street what those rules are. But one of the things that you should know is CML opposes this bill, and they have said, and I don't know if you guys were able to verify this, that the only municipalities, the handful that have passed this, have only passed it for sign signaling at a stop sign, not at a light. And this bill is going to change that, and it's also going to be where they stop at a light, but then they can move on. So no one has passed it where it actually stops and then moves on at a signal. So I do have some concerns about that. And like I said, CML opposes this, CCI opposes it, AGNC opposes this, and And I'm not sure that this is something that's really needed for rural Colorado. I guess I can understand it in metropolitan areas, but not rural Colorado.
Any further discussion? Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the way I understand this particular piece of legislation, the way I understand this and where I'm from, we have a word for this. It's called the California rolling stop. That's not meant to offend anybody. That's actually what it's called in certain places. So now you can get on your bike and just, I'm going to look back and forth and boom, cruise right through because I think it's safe. What if it's not safe? What if there's a vehicle coming and you clean somebody's clock and then they're dead? Now I understand you want to convenience the biker, the bicyclist rather, because the biker where I'm from has a motorbike. Usually it's a Harley. The bicyclist. But does that mean, and this is to the bill sponsors, does that mean that these rolling stops are okay? And what about the person in a vehicle that exercises the same privilege? I'm going to roll up to this stop sign, I'm going to look left and right, it's clear, and I'm just going to do that rolling stop right through. Well, I looked, I cleared myself. It was inconvenient for me to stop, so I didn't want to have to stop. Now I will tell you, I think this is an unsafe bill. I think there's a stop sign there for a reason. It means stop. Stop. Look around. Make sure that you're not going to have a problem at the intersection. So, I think this bill should not be statewide. Absolutely not. I know in rural Colorado, we're not asking for this. Maybe they are in Boulder County, maybe they are in other counties, maybe in our mountain villages they're asking for this, I don't know. But I know one thing in rural Colorado. If you're in a truck loaded with milk, loaded with hay, loaded with grain, loaded with cattle, loaded with vegetables and produce, and you're trying to be a safe driver, and a bicyclist decides to execute this statewide, perhaps soon to be statute, that truck is not going to stop. And the person on that bicycle will be dead as a result of allowing for the rolling stop for that bicycle to be executed and making it a statewide statutory rule. This is dangerous legislation. It's irresponsible legislation. It's pandering and catering to a certain class of people, and I think it's wrong. It's certainly not right for rural Colorado, and I don't know about the rest of Colorado. How many people are going to be injured or die due to this type of legislation? Well, I'd like to hear what the bill sponsors have to say about those comments.
Representative Van Winkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and let me gather my thoughts and aim for a response. First of all, it's not like this is the first time it's been tried. In fact, not only has it been tried in other states, it's been shown to reduce fatalities, reduce traffic bicycle accidents, and I mean, that's the way it is. And frankly, if you've been out on a road with bicycles, which all of us have, this simply decriminalizes something that for most in the real world is how things actually operate. It significantly helps with the flow of traffic. It doesn't increase. I think there's a great underestimation of the IQ of the average cyclist because they're not purposely going to take on a semi whether this law has passed or not passed. In fact, for the average cyclist, this probably won't change anything they're doing anyway. It simply decriminalizes it so that our law enforcement doesn't have to be going and ticketing for approaching a stop sign, slowing down, looking both ways, and not physically getting all the way off of your bike where you can stop, where you can avoid cars and safely go through that intersection, as opposed to getting into a bad situation where you're stopping and then the traffic has to stop and wait for you to go while they're trying to turn right or turn left into that same field of the same intersection. So I commend the bill sponsors for their work on it. I wish I could say it's a brilliant new idea, but it's really not. It's been tried in lots of places. Even within the state of Colorado, lots of municipalities have already passed this. And again, reduces fatalities, reduces accidents, and keeps people safer, keeps the flow of traffic moving, and decriminalizes something that is already common practice.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Van Bieber.
First, I want to thank the bill sponsors for bringing to us a bill that would provide safety for some folks in some places and in some spaces. But there are a lot of other individuals that will be a part of this process. And so when I think about who rides a bicycle and for what purposes and where, and I think about this bill asking someone to stop, to be allowed to roll through a stop sign, and yet if you're at a stop light, you must stop. And I think about all of those children who watch adults and mimic what we do. And so that's the first piece. As a child watches adults roll through a stop sign, the natural extension, I would think, of any child or youth witnessing that process would just then also roll through any stop function or feature in a place where they are riding their bicycle. And should a vehicle turn right, and where I live, the vehicles are 20,000 pounds, 50,000 pounds. If a vehicle turns right, there's a certainty to how that situation will end, and it's probably death. And so my concern is blind spots in those kind of places in rural Colorado, where semis, trucks, trailers are turning right at stop lights, and bicyclists have rolled through, thinking they are okay in their mistaken understanding of what is appropriate in which place, in which space. And so for that reason, I will be a respectful no today, but I have to think about who's coming through in those locations and for what purposes and what their thought processes are as bicyclists. And as children, we know that children will mimic adults. And so for that reason, I'll be a no vote today to ensure that we continue to think about this process, because where I live, anybody turning right will be the one at fault when someone rolls through a stop light on a bicycle and they tangle with something so much bigger than themselves. So thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have really concerns, strong concerns and reservations with this type of legislation. First of all, why would CML be opposed to this? Because this is local governance. This is the realm of local government. Let the municipalities and the counties decide what they want to do. Why does this have to be a state law? Not a rhetorical question. It's a real question. Because people like me want government to be executed at the lowest level, where the rubber meets the road. Not the state controlling everything. Not the federal government controlling everything. You've heard me say this 100 times, if not 1,000. One hand does not fit every glove. One foot does not fit in every boot. This type of legislation is wrong. It's wrong for Colorado. It's definitely wrong for rural Colorado. Now, I don't think you people understand, as you ride your bicycles all along the Front Range and in the mountains and in these particular spaces and places. When you get out in the country, the people that are making your food and that are delivering your food to the places where you can purchase that food or have it processed are truckers. Because truckers move America. If you don't have truckers, you don't have grocery stores full of food. Oh wait, we've seen that during the COVID-19 epidemic. But let me tell you who this puts in jeopardy. Because what happens when you have that accident? My previous comments are not flippant, they're real. People can get hurt, people can get injured, people can get killed. Let the local government decide what is best for their particular area. If Boulder County wants this, they can have it. If the city of Boulder wants it, they can have it. If Denver County wants it or the city of Denver wants it, they can have it. Let their city councils, let their commissioners vote on it. But do not say it's okay to do that rolling stop everywhere in Colorado. Because I will tell you, if you're on 287 out in my district, with literally thousands and thousands of trucks bringing all kinds of commodities, produce, and manufactured or pre-manufactured materials into Colorado, this is dangerous, it's careless, and it is not good law for this state. I don't know why we would bring this type of legislation to this chamber and say what's good for me is good for everybody else, when we know it is not. When people up here will tell you it is not. Let the local government decide. Quit trying to mandate everything from this state capitol and try to make everybody do the same thing because certain people think this is what should be the law in the state of Colorado. This is bad for eastern Colorado, it's bad for northeastern Colorado, it's bad for southeastern Colorado. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Soper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I rise in support of this bill. As someone who does ride a bicycle, I certainly appreciate it. What this bill tacks on to is actually a bill that my predecessor, Representative Yulin Willett, passed when he was in the legislature to create the Idaho stop in Colorado law. That's basically what we're talking about here, except for stoplights, it was for stop signs, and then allowed the local governments to decide. The challenge with that is that as you're riding a bicycle in rural Colorado, it meant that if you come upon a four-way stop on, say, Highway 348, has the jurisdiction actually created the Idaho stop becomes really confusing. So whether it was the county that you're going into or as you're dropping down into, say, Olathe or then over into Delta, I mean, none of them have, and I guarantee you if there happened to be a bicycle there, they wouldn't know what the law is or isn't. I like the fact that this creates a uniform standard across the entire state, albeit it does apply to traffic lights. But I do think it's good. Because if you have a bicycle coming up to a traffic light and no one's around, it's actually safer for them to continue to go through. Because to slow down to a complete stop means losing that momentum. It can actually be more dangerous because by the time you start pedaling again to go through the intersection, now all of a sudden you could have a scenario where a fast-moving car could actually put you in jeopardy. And it would have been much safer for you to have gone ahead and gone through. I used to ride a lot when I was in law school, and I can remember it was always very dangerous riding amongst cars, but it was most dangerous when you had to come to that complete stop and then start moving again. You always worried that a car would immediately try to pass you by or someone would take an additional maneuver and cut you off. And those were times when, even though I was in the best shape of my life, you just can't pedal fast enough to be able to avoid cars in those types of situations. There is a reasonableness standard that I appreciate that's included in here that talks about what a safety stop means. Slowing to a speed of 15 miles per hour or less, then continuing through the intersection if there's no traffic visible in which to yield. Those are key words in here. If you can't see another car, that means there's not another car in the intersection nearby, and you should be allowed to go through. What we're not talking about here is allowing bicyclists to take extraordinary risk. We're not saying you can see a car approaching the intersection and you're going to go blasting through and take your life into your hands. If you do that, that's called personal responsibility, and you should be responsible for your own injuries at that particular time. But I do support this. I actually see this as really codifying practice. I mean, go out anywhere in Colorado. This is already being done. And most of our bicyclists, I don't know if they know that they're not supposed to be doing this, the rolling stop, but they do it anyways. And so codifying practice is something I do believe is good for us here as the legislature. Colorado is a very biker-friendly state, and we should continue to make it a biker-friendly state, and not the type of bikers I know Representative Gray is thinking about. So I urge a yes vote. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Representative Pico.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to this bill. We heard from, in committee, the commander of our Colorado Springs Police Department. Colorado Springs has got a mixture of off-road bicycle lanes, but we have an awful lot of intersections and routes where the bicycles go through. We have a different experience than some others and a number of concerns. One of the key concerns raised by our commander was the issue of traffic accident investigations. And this will complicate those investigations. That is their concern, because it will induce into that the presumption that the bicyclist was correct and the car was wrong. And it is difficult to come through and make sense of an investigation of an accident scene where it really isn't clear as to how that's going to be. So that's one of the several reasons mentioned. I oppose this bill, and I ask for a no vote.
Representative Van Winkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and maybe I can help with my friends on my side of the aisle that often fight against dumb bills. And think of it if it was the opposite. What if it was a bill implementing what this bill is trying to change, which is what if it was a bill that said every biker, when they approach a stop sign, they have to come to a complete stop, get off their bike, get back on their bike, and then look both ways and go. We would probably fight against that bill because we'd say, well, that's silly because bikers are smart enough to look both ways, slow down, make sure that it's safe, and then proceed cautiously. That's what this bill does, and I thank you for bringing it. It simply criminalizes something that is common practice across the state of Colorado today.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Representative Holtorf. So nice to see you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Believe me, the pleasure is mine. I really appreciate your leadership today, and it's a pleasure to serve with you and everybody else in this wonderful chamber as we talk about things in Colorado that we're going to do to make statutory changes. I just want to point out one thing. There was a comment made by my colleague and my friend, my very good friend, that he made a comment that really bothered me. And he said, well, we're already doing this. This is already being done, and we need to codify it in statute. And I think that's a very dangerous precedence. Very dangerous precedence. Because there's a lot of things that are being done all across this state that should not be codified, and they're being done. I really have concern because I don't know how many legislators here have had a CDL, commercial driver's license. I have. I've been catching gears since I was 16. And I know how hard it is to drive an 18-wheeler, a big rig loaded with cargo. It is very difficult to stop. And believe me, if there's an accident or incident, it won't be the biker's fault. Not under this law. It'll be the trucker's fault and the truck company's fault, and they will get to hold that liability. And what will that liability be for those lawyers in the chamber? Wow. Now, in our agricultural freight operation, we have had incidents, we have had accidents. And those particular catastrophic accidents cost an enormous amount of money to reconcile, to settle. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. $500,000. That's real money for a little farm operation like ours. Now I understand that, hey, it's already happening. We're biking, we're out there on the weekend, we're whizzing through these intersections. We're looking. So what's the problem, Representative Holtorf? What's your problem there? Well, I'm trying to make it very clear. We have a problem. When you pass this, you're going to have a bigger problem. And here's another thing that was brought to my attention, ladies and gentlemen. What about the car that's turning right? And maybe the turn signal lens is dirty. Maybe the biker who's whizzing by under this new statute that has been passed that says, hey, I can do the Idaho rolling stop or the, Mississippi rolling stop. Whatever state you want to pick, I guess. And they turn right and the bike gets clipped. And the bicyclist is injured. Who has the liability? You see, this is a bigger issue. Now, I would argue if the state doesn't have this problem, why are we looking to solve it? If municipalities already have these statutes in place where they want it, why are we looking to solve it? And why are we taking this away from those local governments? Well, I know why, because bikers want to load up their cars, they want to go over the state, they want to find these nice roads and trails, and they want to go do their thing. God bless them. And I appreciate that. But when you bring this kind of legislation to rural Colorado, I will tell you it does not work. And I don't want to be in that truck. I don't want to be in the truck that has 55 to 60,000 pounds of cattle in the back, that I am in custody of transporting from point A to point B safely. And I know I cannot step on those brakes hard. I cannot hit that Johnny bar, for those who know what a Johnny bar is. I cannot lock up this rig, potentially jackknife it or lay it over, because those cattle are precious cargo. I have to keep that rig upright. This kind of dangerous legislation causes a problem for truckers, and I feel that someday, if you all pass this legislation, someday someone's going to die. Someone's going to die. Because they're going to think it was okay to roll through this, and they may not be looking as carefully as they need to. So I'm going to be opposed to this on that principle and the issue of liability, and more important, the issue of local control. Ladies and gentlemen, does the state need to control everything? Do you really need to reach out that high? Colorado, you ask yourselves that question. Does the state need to control everything that you do? That's the $10 question today.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Soper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to come down and address the point about liability. Under the fact pattern that was just pointed out, you would have a vehicle turning right into the right-hand lane and somehow hitting a bicyclist who was rolling through the stoplight. However, if you actually look at the bill, what you would see is that it outlines that the bicyclist is not allowed to use this provision in law if they can see another vehicle or if another vehicle is present and viewable within the intersection or near the intersection. So in that particular instance, liability would be found with the bicyclists because they would have clearly been able to see the other automobile. They should have known that the other automobile was present, and they would have been liable had they gone ahead and rolled through the stoplight. So there would not be any liability to the motorists there. That's just plain, simple, logical reasoning. The other element that I just want to point out is, shouldn't this be an element of local control? We heard that in the debate. When it comes to traffic laws, we should have a statewide standard, and that standard should be set by the General Assembly. And we have plenary authority to legislate for the state of Colorado. We've been granted that in the Constitution of the state of Colorado. And when it comes to a matter that affects all of us statewide, and it's of statewide importance, then it is most appropriate for the legislature to write laws in those particular instances. While I love local control for a lot of issues, this is not one of them. By having a standard of traffic laws that differs from one county to another, one municipality within the county to another, means that if you're riding a bicycle across this great state, which, by the way, bicycling is our official or unofficial summertime activity, you could actually inadvertently violate
Hold
the
on,
law.
Representative Sober. Colleagues, it's getting a little loud in here. Let's just quiet down just a little bit so we can hear Representative Sober. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Merci. Under the fact pattern, you could inadvertently, as a bicyclist touring the state, violate one law after another if we allowed the local governments to change the local traffic laws for every little issue going along the way. It becomes very confusing. And something that's a matter of statewide importance, we should have one standard that can be understood statewide, which is why I would ask for a yes vote here. Thank you.
Representative Pico.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One real quick point. A number of people have mentioned liability, and what that will translate to is insurance. So stand by for increases to insurance rates. And what comes next? Mandatory insurance for bicyclists. So let's just vote this down and maintain local control, maintain local authority, and let's move on.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, members, the question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1028 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. The ayes have it. House Bill 1028 as amended is passed. Mr. Schiebel. Oh, Assistant Majority Leader Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to lay over House Bill 1044 until after House Bill 1072.
Are there any objections? Seeing none, House Bill 1044 will be laid over as requested by the Assistant Majority Leader. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title to House Bill 1076.
House Bill 1076 by Representative Lantine, also Senator Buckner, concerning the ability of a hearing aid provider to perform services through the use of telehealth.
Representative Lantine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
It is an honor to serve with you, Rep. Lantine.
Members, I just have to say this. This is my last first bill to present to the Committee of the Whole.
Oh.
But I'm super excited to be here today to move House Bill 1076 and to talk to you about it. And the purpose of House Bill 1076 is to address the issue of not being able to use telehealth for patients when trying to address their hearing loss concerns and be fitted for hearing aids. And so this bill changes to allow that telehealth be used. This will be a great boon to folks who have mobility issues or health concerns that make it difficult for them to go into a physical office, and especially for our rural folks who it's hard to get to a provider, and so they can do this all online. And I asked for an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Is there any further discussion? Rep. Soper.
I'm sorry, Representative Lantine, I couldn't hear you. I'm kidding.
Is there any further discussion? Rep. Baisley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this is a positive move, I think, for the industry that's looking for some flexibility and be able to apply technology for remote service to patients. And while there was objection from part of the industry, I think it's wisdom that we give this kind of flexibility, and so it's kind of a liberty cause. So I recommend a yes vote on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Baisley. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, members, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1076. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 1076 passes. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title to House Bill 1072.
You want to move it?
Sure. Okay. And then you talk about it.
House Bill 1072 by Representatives Will and Roberts, also Senators Donovan and Simpson, concerning the Habitat Partnership Program.
Representative Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1072. There are no committee reports. Oh, in the Appropriations Committee report?
No
All right,
committee
no
reports up
I had it
here.
right.
Rep. Will.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
It is an honor to serve with you, sir.
This bill 22-1072 is a great bill. I've lived this program in my prior career. I lived it since 1990 in my career. I was a CPW representative for the Grand Mesa HPP committee, and then later for the Lower Colorado HPP committee. So it's really the best program CPW has ever developed, in my opinion. The Habitat Program was established in 1990, like I said, to address landowner concerns about the size of deer and elk herds and their impacts to private property, as CPW is liable for that fence and forage losses. That bill started out as strictly a fence and forage law. It's funded by 5% of deer, elk, moose, and pronghorn licenses sold in the HPP area. So there's a committee area, and the funding they get from that area is 5% of those hunting licenses sold for those species. That's how it's funded. It allows for a faster, less governmental way to resolve conflicts, improve both public and private lands, and leverage funds to share the cost to improve the critical relationship between landowners and the Colorado Parks and Wildlife. This is an absolutely great bill, and I would ask for an aye vote.
Representative Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Will, for your leadership on this bill. It's an honor to be doing this one with you. This bill makes some important changes to an already very successful program. It's going to spread this program statewide so that everybody in Colorado can have access to this excellent program, and it will make it permanent so that we know, because we know that this program has worked so well, it's time that we make this permanent within CPW, and so that Coloradans can benefit from this program for years to come. I'd ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Will.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to say that this program has done so much for the tolerance on private land of deer and elk, especially landowners' tolerance for having more. So it's a great benefit to the sportsmen of Colorado, and it's also a great benefit to the people of Colorado. So excellent bill. Vote yes.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, members, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1072. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. 1072 passes. Mr. Shevil, please read the title of House Bill 1044.
Mind if I move it? Please.
House Bill 1044 by Representatives Williams and Kennedy, concerning the selection of members of vacancy committees by central committees.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1044 and the committee report.
So moved. To the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, members, in the original bill, we had various minimum standards with respect to precinct committee people and delegates from the previous caucus. That got a little bit difficult to help manage some of the competing interests, especially since all districts are not alike. So we thought we would simplify the process with an amendment from Representative Kennedy to make it just specific to central committees of that jurisdiction. And I believe it passed unanimously, and it was a good amendment, and I ask that you support it.
Is there any further discussion on the committee report? Representative Larson. Members, please make sure you're in the well if you'd like to talk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize. It is an honor to serve with you. Members, I was not in committee. I do have a little bit of a concern with this bill. I actually like what it's doing, the underlying. I think we do have a legitimate issue with the composition of some vacancy committees, and there's been some interesting things that have happened. However, I am just a little concerned about timeline. given that we have redistricting and that a lot of these central committees have bylaws that are in conflict with this law, I think it is more appropriate to have this take place after the next reorg meeting, which happens next year in February. So with that, I would like to move Amendment L003 to the committee report and ask that it be displayed.
Just give us a second. The amendment is properly before us. Please proceed. Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this amendment is very simple. It simply just moves the enactment date of this bill, it should pass, to February 16th. So by law, the committee meetings, the central committee meetings, the reorg meetings have to take place between February 1st and February 15th. So this sets the enactment date to February 16th. So what this will do is at those reorg meetings, all of the affected jurisdictions will be able to update their bylaws to be in compliance with this law, rather than creating this situation where it's already kind of chaotic and hectic. If something were to happen between the enactment and next year, we could have situations where there's confusion over bylaws. People already, may not understand what the current law is. So I think this is just a cleaner way, and it gives an opportunity for these districts to know what they're adopting and making sure that their bylaws are in compliance. So I would ask for a yes vote.
Is there any further discussion on Amendment L003? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I rise in opposition to this amendment. I understand the intent of the amendment sponsor on this, but vacancies can occur at any time, and I think moving the effective date out to 2023 just is an unnecessary risk and burden at this point. So I'd ask for a no vote.
Representative Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would say something very similar. I think that there's something to be said for giving the parties a little bit of time to update their rules, and yet what I am most concerned about is that if there is a vacancy for any of these offices later this year, I don't want a group of 3 people getting together to appoint the successor. I think it needs to have more people involved in filling these vacancies. So I would ask for a no vote.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L003 to the State Civic, Military, and Veteran Affairs Committee report. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The noes have it. The amendment is lost. Back to the committee report. Representative Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to take this opportunity to express appreciation for Representative Williams for working with me on this. When I saw this bill introduced, I thought, okay, this is a legitimate problem that Representative Williams is trying to solve, because I've seen it firsthand. There's a county commissioner vacancy in Jeffco about 10 years ago that did get filled by a committee of 5 people, where it really should be more like 300, given the size of the county of Jefferson, to fill these vacancies. So I really appreciated Representative Williams. The introduced bill didn't get it quite right. He was very gracious in working with me on an amendment to try to make this work a little bit better. That's what's represented in this committee report. I ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on the committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the State Civic, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee report. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The committee report is adopted. To the bill. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So members, I'll be brief in my remarks here. And I do want to give a shout out to the Colorado Sun. They do some of the best reporting here in the Capitol. But a couple of years ago, they went ahead and wrote an article, and this was back in 2018. The title of it, I think, says it all. Nearly 1 in 4 lawmakers for 2018 landed seats via vacancy committee. And so here are a few sentences that I'll read to paint the picture here. Nearly 1 in 4 lawmakers, as we just told, and, quote, the side door entrance to the Colorado General Assembly will remain equally open next year, as at least 5 and possibly as many as 8 lawmakers plan to depart their seats at the start of the 2019-2020 legislative term. The replacements won't get picked by voters, but rather by a vacancy committee of activists from the party that holds the seat. Colorado is one of only 5 states to use this kind of partisan process, which gives appointment panels outsized influence in shaping the legislature and public policy. And I'm going to go ahead and quote this from one of our former party chairs, Dick Wadhams. He's quoted in this article as saying that these committees have tremendous power. Quote, I mean, think about it. A fairly small group of people elected two state senators this week. A lot of times it creates a domino effect. The reason I bring this up is because I think when we stop and look at the issue, it becomes very apparent that when there are a small group of people picking representatives that could go on to represent 80,000 people or senators that go on to represent 100,000 people, that the system that we have currently in place could potentially lend itself to allowing party insiders or a process that's not quite fair to occur when picking these people to make these appointments. So what's the solution? Well, one solution is to simply expand the number of people who get to have a say on who ultimately represents, who ultimately is selected during these vacancies to represent the people. Essentially, what I'm asking for is that we expand that voting population, that we enfranchise voters and allow for more eyes on the process and ultimately more votes in the system. And if we have more votes and more eyes on this, the better outcomes that we'll have. So I would ask for a yes vote on this bill. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Madam Speaker Pro Tem Benavidez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And members, I stand in opposition to this bill. You know, I've been a party member, an affiliated voter for not my entire life, because when I was 18 in 1972, honestly, I went as an unaffiliated. I wasn't sure. But when I figured out the process of how you get somebody on the ballot, I quickly changed that. So I was only unaffiliated for a couple of years. And I think people that are members of parties, that both of the major parties, even the smaller parties, those are run by the party members. They're not run by the legislature. I know in my county, in my House district, I think the average number of committee people are, of committee people are about 40, 2 for each of the areas. So 40 is the average of committee positions. And then you also, actually it goes up to 80 because it's double that for two committee people. That's 80. And then you have the officers of that House district. So roughly, and any elected official, at least in the party I'm from, any elected official that lives in that district also can vote. So usually it's somewhere between 80 and 100 people that vote. That's what it's been forever. And I know at least in my county, if I go back to my party and my Adams County, my affiliation party is very active. And if I go back and I say, hey, we're changing how this is done, you didn't get any input into this, we decided at this level we're going to change it. I think it's a mistake. I think it's a mistake for all of us. If you have some districts where only 5 or 6 people show up, maybe the reason why is there's only one candidate running for the vacancy. Maybe it's because they don't like either and they don't want to waste their time. That's really incumbent on the people that are running. I don't know, and I've been a part to vacancy committees for a long time. And because I've been a committee person for many, many years. I don't want to say how many now, but you don't want to know. But anyway, having been a committee person, and my father was a committee person before that. The problem is, this is grassroots. Why, if we're going to try to fix this problem that we've identified, let's go back to the grassroots and say to them, who do you want on this vacancy committee? Do you want other people, or do you want the people that are active in that House district or that Senate district? I don't want to go back to my Adams County party and say, yeah, we kind of thought it was better for us to decide for you that we need to expand this. I would rather get their input. I think it's a mistake for us to make this decision. I don't disagree that the proposal in front of us expands the potential number of people that might turn out at a vacancy committee. But is that what we want? And is that what we want without input from the grassroots level? I mean, that's one of the major ways, at least in my history, that we've gotten people to be committee people. Because committee people are an important job. It's a tough job. It's helping the candidates of your party. It's making calls. It's showing up at meetings. It's doing all of that. But the one benefit we tell them is if there is a vacancy, you get to vote on that. You get to pick that person. And the person, even the most recent vacancy that we had filled from a member from, I think it's Arapahoe County, that is only for one session. She has to run for re-election. We had someone from Adams County in the other party 3 years ago that was elected. He was only there for one session as well. We cannot forget the grassroots people in our parties by passing something like this because we seem to know better. I don't envision I know better. I envision that I would listen to what the people in my party at the grassroots level are saying to me. So I encourage a no vote to this bill. Thank you.
Representative Sandridge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I'm going to try to boil this down to what this bill is. If you don't like the bill, you want to block more people voting for their representative. And we don't even have to look at politics. If you look at scientific studies, if you want a representative sample, you increase the sample. If you want a district to have a more representative say in who their representatives, you increase the sample. If you have 3 people voting on their representative of 100,000, it's not very representative. You know, and I have no really too much to say on this. This bill actually parallels how I was elected. You know, I had maybe about 38 people. 40 vote. But it's nice to give everybody, more people, the opportunity in having a say in who represents them. So that's where I'm kind of conflicted on this. Is what do we? This doesn't seem too much of an impactful bill in that giving someone a say. I mean, we could have it where the chair, vice chair, secretary elects, fills the vacancy. But I don't know if that's a representative sample. So I'm still trying to find, I'm still undecisive here. I'm still trying to find what's wrong with giving more people in a district a say in who leads them, who represents them. So just got a couple questions. Thanks.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say in House District 33, where I was the House District Chair before I was the state representative, we've been doing this exact composition. You know, when you're in your meeting, you can opt to, within our party, you can opt to a different vacancy committee than the one that's set forth in the standard rules. We've been doing this consistently for as long as I've been around, which is about 15 years now. There's never been a problem. Everybody has always enjoyed it because they've known that if a big decision like this is going to be made, they're going to have a chance to have a say. We've never failed to make quorum. We've never had any kind of problem whatsoever. But I'm in a multi-county district, so the default for us is just a handful of people make the decision as to both who would be the replacement representative, but also who would be the replacement candidate during election season. And I'll just tell you, like the there's nothing to be afraid of in doing this. We've been doing it nonstop for as long as I've been around, which is over a decade now. That's how House District 33 has always operated. We've had no problems whatsoever, and I'd ask you for a yes vote.
Any further discussion? Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So members, I rise in opposition to the bill, but not because I'm opposed to increasing participation. To be entirely frank with you, I think the bill that should be before us is a bill to eliminate vacancy committees as well in its entirety and go to a special election. I think that situations that we have seen in recent memory where we had a member who was elected from a certain party, change his registration in the 11th hour, and then had another party fill that vacancy committee, I think it's a system that's inherently ripe for abuse. However, that is not the bill before us, nor is it within the bill title, so I will get back to the bill, and I appreciate the grace. The reason that I am concerned about this is, again, I don't know that it's necessarily any worse than the current party, the current structure that we have. It's very decentralized. But under this bill, my concern is, and I don't know how this works in the other party, but in many precincts, certainly in my area and all throughout Jefferson County, and I suspect in other parts of the state, there are a significant number of these PCP positions that are vacant. I know in my district, about half of those positions are full. And what this creates, I think, is a situation where, given that under this bill, a party chairman or a local county chairman would be given authority to elevate people to a PCP position, what I think this creates is a possible situation where you could have a district that has a lot of vacancies, then a vacancy occurs, and prior to the vacancy for the office occurring, there are a number of PCPs that are elevated within a few days that are aligned with a certain chair, aligned with a certain candidate, and would actually serve to further undermine the democratic process that we're trying to get here. So I would agree if we had a more engaged system where we had PCPs that were in place and where there weren't a number of vacancies. And again, I can only speak from my experience. I don't know, maybe everybody else has full committees where all of these positions are full. I suspect that's not the case. But what I don't want to do is perhaps empower individual county party chairs to put them in a position where now we're requiring that every member of the vacancy committee be at least the central committee. So you could go in and now they would be legally obligated to say, oh, well, we've got 40 vacant slots, so I got to elevate 40 people. And if they come in with a list of 40 people that are to a specific candidate, I would argue that that would further undermine the democracy. So again, this is not against increasing participation, because again, I'll lay that marker right down right now. Give me a bill to go to special elections, I'll vote for it. Because I don't think that this is a process that has worked particularly well, but that's not the bill that we have before us. So I would ask for a no vote on this bill today, and let's work on a process that will actually increase democratic participation in this process. And that's basically all I have to say.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Bradfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am opposed to this bill just as it is. I am not opposed to the vacancy committee having expanded and including as many people as possible in a district. That's fine. My objection in this bill is that it's coming down from us to the local level, and those districts have some autonomy, and they could be encouraged to change their bylaws, but I don't think we as a body here need to take on that authority over them. So I would like for people to think about it. How much authority do we want to have? Do you want this body to have over your House district and how it's run? Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none. Oh, Representative Luck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a distinction that I think is important. I too don't like the idea of us as the state government imposing particular rules on the parties. I think that the way that the parties operate should be done in-house. It's a private organization and they should decide that. But I think once you rise to the level of having someone who was elected by the fullness of the community, then that changes the dynamic. We're not talking about individuals who might be running for leadership in that party. We're talking about people who are serving the whole community. And to say that we as a body believe at a minimum, there should be representation from each section of that community present to elect that next person or select that next person, I don't think is an infringement. I think it honors all of the different voices in the community. I don't also believe that it restricts the grassroots because it's at a minimum. If that vacancy committee wants to expand beyond that and invite more voices, then they're free to do so. But this bill simply suggests that 2 or 3 or 4 people shouldn't determine the leader over 80,000. And so for that reason, I support. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1044? Members, seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1044 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. 1044 as amended is passed. Mr. Shivo, please read the title of House Bill 1037.
House Bill 1037 by Representatives Hooton and Van Winkle, also Senators Holbert and Jaquez Lewis, concerning the ability of a person to operate a dual marijuana business at the same location.
Representative Van Winkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1037.
So moved.
There's no committee report or anything. So members, what we're doing here, what exactly happened is a couple years ago we did the marijuana sunset both for the retail statutes and the medical statutes. And in that bill, it turned out to almost be a 200-page bill, and we reorganized many of the statutes. We ended some regulations that didn't make sense. We increased regulations, increased enforcement for marijuana enforcement division in places where it did make sense. And in that large process, in the dozens and dozens of amendments, literally, in the 200-some pages, we accidentally left a sentence on. And I really wanted to, I don't see Matt Gray, I really want to blame him. And I was perfectly fine with the tactic of blaming Matt Gray for that error made a couple years ago.
Representative Gray will be blamed.
Very good. And so I'm taking the personal responsibility, since I actually was a sponsor of that bill, and bringing forward House Bill 1037, which simply puts that sentence back into law that allows, and it makes sense to, have medical and retail marijuana sales be done in the same building. We definitely don't want to create a circumstance just because we accidentally left off that sentence and because it was accidentally deleted, where we have marijuana shops suddenly buying up double the space that they currently have, so that they can have one retail and one medical in 2 separate buildings. That would not be good for Colorado, and this bill makes sense. I ask for a yes vote.
Representative Hooton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, currently there are 575 co-located businesses in Colorado, all of which are out of compliance because of a legislative oversight. In the reauthorization of the cannabis statutes, this provision was inadvertently dropped. We are talking about a facility with separate entrances, one for recreational, one for medical. And these are all approved and licensed by local jurisdictions. This is not a statewide issue. It is a local jurisdiction issue. And right now, these 575 businesses in Colorado are out of compliance. And so what this bill simply does is put them back into compliance. And we urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1037? Seeing none, members, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1037. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 1037 passes. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of House Bill 1043.
House Bill 1043 by Representatives Pico, also Senator Heisey, concerning motor vehicles that operate on the roadway with fewer than 4 wheels in contact with the roadway.
Representative Pico.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 22-1043 and the committee report. Appropriations Committee report.
Please also move the Transportation and Local Government report as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the Transportation Local Government report.
To the Appropriations report. Representative Pico.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appropriations Committee met and allocated sufficient funds to make the computer system changes, software changes, and registration issues.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the Appropriations report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The Appropriations Committee report passes. To the Transportation and Local Government report. Representative Pico.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Transportation Local Government Committee passes with one amendment, which specified the department shall issue an autocycle a motorcycle license plate, which makes it easier on the department to implement this bill. I ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the Transportation and Local Government Committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the Transportation and Local Government Committee report. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The Transportation and Local Government report passes. To the bill, Representative Pico.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill is brought to me by the motorcycle groups, interest groups, and what they want to do is break out the definition of an autocycle, which is a three-wheeled vehicle, separate from motorcycles. At the present time, they're treated the same. Why, you might ask? Because this data is used by CDOT to prioritize transportation projects. They want to break out the crash data so that it is clear to see the difference between a motorcycle and an autocycle, which is a lot closer to being an automobile. That's the rationale. As a small number, they think of crashes, but we really don't know until we break the data out and start doing this. But again, this is an interest item. I would say this is a good bill. It is a easy rider, and I ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1043? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1043 as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 1043 as amended is passed. Mr. Shield, please read the title of House Bill 1060.
House Bill 1060 by Representative Sirota, also Senator Gonzalez, concerning the establishment of contribution limits under the Fair Campaign Practices Act for candidates for school district director.
Representative Sirota.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1060 and the Appropriations Report.
To the Appropriations Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This just appropriated a very small sum of money for the Secretary of State to be able to adjust their system, and I ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on the Appropriations Committee report? Seeing none, the question is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. The Appropriations report passes. To the bill, Representative Sirota.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the voters of Colorado have established a preference for contribution limits to candidates for office. We placed it in the Constitution with Amendment 27, but it did not govern a couple other elections, candidates for county office or candidates for school board. In 2019, the legislature passed a bill to place limits on candidates for county office, and it was signed by the governor, is now in law. And what this bill aims to do is place those exact same limits on candidates for individual contributions and small donor committees for candidates for school board. We have seen over the last 10 to 15 years a very alarming uptick in very outsized contributions from individual donors to candidates for school board for this local volunteer unpaid position. And this bill just seeks to put very reasonable limits on those candidates. So it's $2,500 for an individual contribution to a candidate running for school board. It still allows for the vast majority of contributions out there, but what it does do is what the U.S. Supreme Court has said multiple times is allowable when it comes to contribution limits, is that the purpose of them is to avoid the appearance of or actual quid pro quo corruption. And when you see candidates receiving contributions from individuals in the amounts of $30,000, $40,000, that raises red flags for a lot of voters out there. So this can help restore a bit of integrity to the process, and I ask for your support.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1060? Representative Baisley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, this bill just seems to me to be a pro-union, anti-grassroots bill. And what happens is unions will take control over a school board, which is not their purview to do. The school board belongs to the people, belongs to the citizens, but unions will control the school board, and then they get to negotiate their collective bargaining unit with themselves in control of that school board. Parents, citizens, do not pay attention day in and day out to this because they're going about their lives, and when they see that, oh my gosh, the school district is not responding to what I would prefer as a parent or as a taxpayer, then they're trying to rise up against a very organized and very well-funded union that receives millions of dollars to fund that union, lifted from the teachers' paychecks by the administration that the union also controls. So when the citizens then call on someone who is wealthy and has a concern about choice in schools and freedom and liberty and trying to counter that ominous union culture, then they very naturally call on people who are well-to-do and are willing to help them out, because the citizens typically don't have an extra $2,500 each to put into that fight. So they appeal to those people, and they will come through. But this attempt is to snuff out that ability, so that the unions will always have control and not have competition to control the school board that they can then control for their funding and to negotiate collective bargaining with their own folks. So this is an insidious bill, and I would very strongly urge a no vote.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I would first remind you that unions are not the only entities that form small donor committees in Colorado. This is a structure that is available for any sort of organization where they have individual members that want to come together to act collectively. The second thing I will remind you is to reach the limits in this bill, you would have to have 500 individuals together saying, we are each going to give $50 to contribute to this particular candidate. This is simply a tool to allow groups of people to act collectively. Not just unions, but any group of people that want to act collectively. I would argue that this is a far different story than one individual who may have a very unique interest coming in and saying, I'm going to write a $25,000 check out of my personal finances to support this campaign. We want to encourage grassroots people to come together and contribute to supporting a candidate that they want.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, members, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1060 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes clearly have it. House Bill 1060 as amended is passed. Nice job, Rep. Sirota, an Oscar-worthy performance. Representative Assistant Majority Leader Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that the committee rise and report, the House rise and report, sorry.
The House will rise and report. The committee will rise and report.
House will come back to order. Mr. Shi will please read the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee of the Whole begs leave to report it has under consideration the following attached bills, being the second reading thereof and making the following recommendations thereon. House Bill 1028 as amended 1037, 1043 as amended 1044, as amended 1060, as amended 1072, 1076, 1150, 1169, passed on reading and ordered engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 22 and Senate Bill 66 passed on second reading and ordered revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage.
Representative Woodrow. Thank you, Representative Woodrow. Members, you have heard the motion. There is one amendment at the desk. Mr. Schiebel, please read the Larson Amendment, which is L003 to House Bill 22-1044.
Representative Larson moved to amend the report of the Committee of the Whole to reserve the action taken by the committee and not adopting the following Larson Amendment, L003 to House Bill 1044, to show that said amendment passed and that House Bill 1044 as amended passed.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You already heard the arguments for this. I would urge an aye vote.
If you don't mind moving it and asking for it to be displayed, which it already is.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been a little while. So I move the Larson Amendment to House Bill 22-1044 and ask that it be displayed.
Thank you, Representative Larson. It's been properly moved and displayed. Is there further discussion? Representative Kennedy.
Good amendment vote, yes.
That was not me that said that, Mr. Speaker. And thank you for the recognition. I asked for a no vote on this amendment. I recognize what Representative Larson is trying to do by delaying implementation to try to avoid disrupting existing party rules, but I think that the higher priority is making sure that if a vacancy occurs this year, that we have these new standards in place to make sure it's not a committee of 5 people that comes in to fill this vacancy, and then it's a committee with a much larger representative group. So please vote no on this amendment.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the Larson Amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to, I don't have to take a 21C. Please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Those participating online, Majority Leader Eskar, how do you vote?
No.
Majority Leader Eskar votes no. Representative Tipper, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Tipper votes no. Representative Ricks, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Ricks votes no. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Ortiz votes no. Representative Basenecker, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Basenecker votes no. Representative Doherty, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Doherty votes no. Please close machine. With 17 aye votes, 42 no votes, and 6 excused, the Larson Amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole is lost. The question before us is the adoption of the report of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Schiebel, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Majority Leader Eskar, how do you vote?
Yes.
Majority Leader Escar votes yes. Representative Tipper, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Tipper votes yes. Representative Ricks, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ricks votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Representative Basenecker, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Basenecker votes yes. Representative Doherty, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Doherty votes yes. Representative Young. Please close the machine. With 39 aye votes, 20 no votes, and 6 excused, the report of the committee of the whole is passed. Assistant Majority Leader Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Until Monday or Tuesday?
Oh, Tuesday, yeah.
What day is that? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to lay over the balance of the calendar until Tuesday, February 22nd.
Seeing no objection, the balance of the calendar will be laid over until Tuesday, February 22nd. That brings us to announcements and introductions. I have a quick one. Representative Lindsay will replace Representative Michaelson Janae on Public and Behavioral Health and Human Services for today only. Representative Sirota.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Public and Behavioral Health and Human Services Committee will be hearing a presentation from the School of Public Health on House Bill 21-1317 and one bill, House Bill 22-1143. We're going to give everybody just a few minutes to grab their lunch, and then we'll be meeting at noon in our regular room 112.
Thank you, Representative Sirota. Representative Ransom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to announce that the Aerospace and Defense Caucus is getting started up again, and from last year, and our first lunch is going to be next Wednesday. You should have emails in your that have been emailed to you with the information, and all you need to do is respond. It'll be across the street in the State Services Building in the conference room on the 6th floor. We have some wonderful people coming to talk about Space Force and some other ideas, the industry, education, those of you that like space and astronauts, things like that. This is a fun caucus to come and attend. And just so you know, the day at the Aerospace Day at the Capitol is coming up on March 8th. So please sign up for that too. There will be displays and a lunch provided as well, but I just want you to get that on your calendar. And then the coming up one this week is February 23rd. So please make plans to attend.
Thank you, Representative Ransom. Representative Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is the 500th Friday since my son Alex was murdered, along with 11 others, on July 20th, 2012. He was celebrating his 27th birthday. It only lasted 38 minutes. That's 3,500 days ago, and just 20 weeks short of 10 years. When I look at the clock on days like this, I'm looking at the clock now, I had already been around to area hospitals with a picture like this of my son asking ER doctors and nurses if they had seen him, because I didn't know where he was. At this time, and I had come back to Gateway High School and told his mom and his little sister that he was still in the theater and he wasn't coming out. And now I was trying to call my mom to tell her that her only grandson was in that theater. I was having a difficult time getting a hold of her. The sights and sounds of that entire day come back at me in flashbacks when my mind wanders during this day. And I want to let those outside of this building who have a much more vivid memory of that day than I do, those who sat with Alex that night, and all the others that were there and impacted, I want to let you know that I am here for you. I will do all I can to ensure that your experience is never forgotten. Hang in there when times are dark and hopeless. It will get better. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Sullivan. Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A very important event is going to occur this weekend. It's called Japanese Internment Day of Remembrance. Now, I'm going to retitle that. Japanese American Internment Day of Remembrance. If you go to your email, you'll see the governor has posted an announcement about this. If you know about House District 64, you know that Camp Amachi is located in my district. And this is a Japanese internment camp. I'm going to read these words from the governor's office. I have permission of the Speaker of the House. Today we will remember the inexcusable incarceration of Japanese Americans, a deep injustice, and we honor Japanese Coloradoans who are interned at the Amachi site by continuing the legacy of leaders who acted to deliver justice, preserving and protecting the Amachi site presents a valuable opportunity to interpret and learn from our past, telling the complete story. I'm glad to see this site getting ever closer to being rightfully included as a national park in the national park system. I think it's important that we remember World War II. I think it's important that we remember that this took place. But I have a personal story. I don't know if you folks know, my stepmother is Japanese American. I have two stepsisters that are Japanese Americans. I lived most of my life after my father remarried with a wonderful woman who was interned in Utah. Now, I will tell you, their family lost everything. From San Francisco, they went to Utah, and after the war, because of national security reasons, during the war, they were interned. But after the war, they were released. But I want to say the lesson that I learned from my stepmother and all of her family, I want to share that with you. After the war, they were proud Americans. They were proud Japanese Americans, and they have left the imperialist Japanese country and their authoritative rule to find a new life in America. They reintegrated into society after the war. My stepmother and her family did not complain. They put their heads down and they went back to work because they knew what American society offered, and they knew the American dream, and they had the opportunity to rebuild. They left the internment camp, each one of them with one suitcase and the clothes on their back. And thank God this country is the country it is today, because they left and they restarted their lives again and moved to New York City. My stepmother went to NYU. She graduated a nurse. She practiced nursing. And then she married her husband, her first husband, and had a wonderful life. She told me stories about her experience, but she never gave up on America, ever, and she's still alive today. I will tell you, I am so proud of the living proof of this country and the greatness that is the American dream. Despite the dark decisions that were made in our nation's history, despite the dark times, let us understand what this country is and what this country offers to anybody who wants the American dream and will put their head down and go back to work and make it their reality. So I will be celebrating this weekend, and I look for the day that that national park is opened up so we never forget the dark history of our past. So we can never repeat the dark history of our past, but we will always celebrate what is America and never try to step on it, stomp on it, knock it down, disparage it, or talk against it, because nowhere in the world do you get what we get here. And I have been around the world more times than I care to count. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate your consideration and time.
Thank you, Representative Holtorf. Madam Speaker Pro Tem Benavides.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague for bringing our attention to this matter, because I think it is important, and it's an issue that crosses party lines. I have a good friend, Marge Tanawaki. She's still alive. She lives here in Denver, and she was interned at one of the internment camps. And I learned from her what was involved in that, what happened, and it, of course, piqued my curiosity. But this was more than a dark time. The reason people were interned, it was Executive Order 9066 that did that. It was done by the then president, and it was done out of fear, even though it took many years for that executive order and the impact of that to be overturned by our Supreme Court. It was eventually overturned, and a very small amount, it was either 20 or 25,000, was given to the families as reparations for that. But my colleague is right. People lost everything. And if you haven't gone down to where Amache, it's the only camp that was here in Colorado. I went 2 or 3 years ago, and there's 2 small buildings there. It's not too far from the Sand Creek Massacre site, but it's worth going and seeing that. And with the bill passed at the federal level, hopefully they will be able to construct a museum similar to what they have at the Sand Creek Massacre site, so people can learn from that. In the interim, there is a wonderful display, if you haven't seen it, at the Colorado History Museum. They have a video that goes through that entire time. They have actually a replica of sort of the housing that was available. And if you go look in it, it's very small, and whole families were put there. But the other piece of this is I think we can celebrate that during that terrible time, our then Governor Ralph Carr stepped up and said he opposes that. You can't do an executive order without and put people who are citizens or here lawfully and put them into internment camps. And he did that because he truly believed that. That was his last term in office. When he attempted another office, he failed because of that. But that is why he is an important figure in our history, and it was because of his actions that many Japanese stayed here and built communities here. In Northeast Denver, there was a huge community. Another friend of mine, Derek Okubo, who works for the city and county of Denver, his grandfather, who was an internee, had a store on 29th and York Street. And that store, people would come there. There's a church in Wheat Ridge area that there's still many Japanese families that worship there. This is something I think we can be proud of, but it doesn't repay the debt that we owe to Japanese citizens that are living here, people of Japanese ancestry. So I think it is something we should take this time to reflect and support those communities as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. Representative Bluck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is Friday, and it is the end of a week where we as a nation celebrate love and kindness. And so today I wanted to honor both of those character traits. I was intending to honor Representative Sullivan for demonstrating to us so faithfully a father's love, but it seems that he has left, I think. Oh, he's right there. Thank you. I was looking at his chair. So I do. I just honor the Father's love that he demonstrates to us time and time again. And then as for kindness, yesterday down in the cafeteria, Representative Gray performed an act of kindness for a family who was here. He does that often, if you guys have noticed, and it's just part of his day-to-day routine, and I wanted to toast him as well. Someone left something in the box, which brings me much joy. It doesn't have a signature, so I don't know who, but they want to honor all of us for giving each other grace as our opinions differ. So thanks, guys, and again, you are loved and worthy. You are amazing and adored, and I really enjoy seeing you all of the time. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative Luck. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I echo Representative Luck's thoughts and just encourage everyone to take the love that you feel from your colleagues and that you see from each other and put it back out into the world, not just in words, but in actions. The things we do here matter. We have the opportunity every day to come here and make people's lives better. And so while I feel a ton of love and support in this room all the time, I also know that love and support for each other inside this chamber isn't enough for what we have to do. What we have to do is turn around and take the support we have for each other, turn it outside of this building, and make other people's lives better. And I encourage everybody to think about how we could do that while you're having a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gray. Seeing no further announcements or introductions, we're going to do committee reports real quick. So, Mr. Schiebel, please read reports of committees of reference.
Committee on Education. After consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. House Bill 1101 be amended as followed, and as so amended be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. House Bill 1107 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. House Bill 1070 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. Committee on Energy and Environment. After consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. House Bill 1007 be amended as followed, and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Finance with favorable recommendation. House Bill 1011 be amended as followed, and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. House Bill 1012 be amended as followed, and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. Committee on Finance. After consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. House Bill 1005 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. House Bill 1018 be amended as followed, and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. House Bill 1017 be amended as followed, and as so amended be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. House Bill 1039 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. House Bill 1048 be referred to the Committee on Appropriations. House Bill 1053 be amended as followed, and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. House Bill 1098 be amended as followed, and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Finance with favorable recommendation. House Bill 1109 be amended as followed, and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Finance with favorable recommendation. House Bill 1112 be amended as followed, and as so amended be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. House Bill 1135 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Schiebel. Assistant Majority Leader Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess until later today.
See no objection, the House will stand in recess until later today.